It's a strange feeling to be giving a Shabbos Hagadol Drasha to an empty shul. And it's very strange to have a Shabbos Hagadol Drasha recorded. But a special welcome to everybody virtually. It's wonderful to feel the sense of Achdus virtually, the sense of Achdus, and feel so together. I'd like to begin with a Kapitel Tehillim. A Kapitel Tehillim for all those who need a refuah shalema, who need a cure, and for all those who are suffering and struggling in so many ways. Let's say a Kapitel Tehillim together. Kapitel Chav. Lam natzeach mizmor leDavid yancho adinoi b'imtzoda yesagev Hashem lehe Yaakov yishlach ezrecha mikodesh umitzion yisadeka yizkar kol mincheisecha v'iloscha yidashne selo yiten lecha chilvavecha v'chalatzascha yimale yiniraneno b'shuasecha b'shem Eloheinu nidgoy yimale adinoi kol mishalisecha Ata yadaiti ki yeshi adinoi mishicha yaneu mishmei kodshe b'gvuro yisiyesha yiminoi ele borecha ve'ele vasusim ma'anachnu b'shem adinoi Eloheinu nazkir Heimakoru v'nafolu v'anachnu kamnu v'nisoidot adinoi yeshia hamelech ya'aneinu v'yoim koreinu. This Pesach season finds us at the saddest period we have ever known in our lifetimes, at least. So many funerals, so many people dying, so many people sick. We're in the midst of a plague. And that's actually pretty apropos for this time of year, for Pesach and the 10 plagues. But whereas Pesach was v'lo yiten hamashchis, lovel botechem limgoif, that the destruction was unable to reach our homes, alas, now the plague has reached our homes. We're suffering along with the rest of humanity. People are suffering emotionally. People are sitting Shiva without any visitors, without the ability to say Kaddish. It's not easy to enter a Yom Tov when you're sick with fever and hallucinating at night, but you're not sick enough to go to a doctor. What kind of Yom Tov is it for those who have no strength to celebrate? When you're oxygenated and just focused on managing to breathe. And I heard so many pleas from families begging for food because they lost their source of livelihood. And in the midst of this, our shuls are locked and we can't get to a minyan. This Yom Tov, there's no singing of Hallel with a minyan, no birkas koyanim, no laning in the current state that we're in. This Pesach appears to be the worst Pesach we've ever experienced in our entire lives. So I received a phone call the other day from a very special lady. She's the matriarch of a wonderful, beautiful family. She has children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And every year, she spends Pesach in a hotel with her children and grandchildren and everybody around, beaming from nachas, as the children cry out the Manishtana, as each child goes along and says the Manishtana. She says, my heart just beams with nachas. It's a true festival of redemption. She calls me and she says, you know, I was actually planning on doing this year the same. I had everything booked. Memories flood my mind as I remember Pesachs of old. And as I think to myself, tears come to my eyes. Why, God? Why? A mens tracht und Gott lacht, they say. A person has plans, all sorts of plans, and God, he's got a different plan. One of her grandchildren is in hospital now. 3 of her children are quarantined themselves and suffering from the disease. And Pesach is finding her in self-quarantine, unable to leave her house, tucked in safely, petrified to go anywhere. Her kids are just a block away. And yet she says, this Pesach, I'm going to be celebrating all by myself, self-quarantined, all alone, without anyone to share the Seder with. It is tempting to get depressed when you're all alone. What's the Avoda of Pesach, she asks me. What am I supposed to do? I'm going to ask the Manishtana to myself. I'm going to say a good Dvar Torah, which my children and grandchildren would have said, and I'm going to say it to myself. I'm going to imagine that the whole Seder from beginning to end is going to take me a full 35 minutes. And there'll be no one there to ask me the following morning, "Nu, so what time did the Seder finish?" What indeed is the Avoda? How are we supposed to be celebrating this Pesach? And those of us who are still fortunate enough, thank God, to not have been hit directly by this plague and not having felt the wrath, can take heed. As we focus on this Bobby, who, as she says, "Hey, lachmo anyo diacholu avosano be'arad Mitzrayim," this is the bread of affliction which our fathers ate. She will look at the matzah, at the bread of affliction, and she will say, "This, what I feel in my bones." If we can feel the pain and hurt of the quarantine Bobby, and if we can learn what Pesach is, what the Avoda of Matzah is, then we can perhaps enter a bright, beautiful, and joyous experience this Pesach. My dear friends, we have an opportunity to celebrate Pesach for the first time in our lives, and thereby put ourselves on a brand new path. Dear Bobby, if you're listening, as you sit down to your quarantine 35-minute Seder, ask yourself the question, why am I doing this? Why is it so important to sit down and to eat the matzah and say those words with no family and no nachas around the table? Why indeed am I doing this? This year we have an opportunity to feel the joy of matzah with no frills and no cultural gimmicks, just the beauty of plain, simple matzah. And matzah has a power to bring us joy. Not an external joy, but a deep inner joy that stems from the mitzvah itself, an inner, authentic simcha. The Arizal says that the happiest, most joyous moment of the entire year, even greater than Zman Simchaseinu and Sukkot, says the Arizal, is Pesach night, when we eat the matzah. In the Kabbalistic terminology of the Arizal, zivug ad asiyah. The marriage between God and the Jewish people reaches all the way down to the physical world. Because you see, no other mitzvah is there just to simply eat, to be yourself. When you put on tefillin, you have to do something and act. When you keep Shabbos, you're moving towards the Shabbos. You're doing something different. But matzah is just food. Hey, take an exotic food, and God himself commands you and says, this food is the food I would like you to eat. This food is ordained by God himself. And as we sit down to the Seder with no frills, just plain matzah, we actually have an opportunity for the first time in our lives to find meaning and to rejoice in the mitzvah itself. Let's expand and study. What does the Arizal mean? And let's study together what is the Avoda of Matzah. Let's discover the joy from within. Not because we have family around. Not because we have any external reason to be happy. Let's see how a person quarantined on their own can experience the matzah. We have no external distractions this year, just the avoda itself. So let's focus. Why do we eat matzah? What's the reason we eat matzah? In the Haggadah, when we get to the point of describing why we eat matzah, So the words we use are, we say, matzah zu shanu oichlim al shumma. This matzah that we eat, what do we eat it for? What's the reason? Al shum shelehispik b'tzekes shel aviseinu lehachmitz, because the dough of our forefathers was unable to rise. Ad sheniglo aleim melech malchei amlochim hakadosh baruch hu ugeolam, until God, the King of the kings of kings, appeared to them and redeemed them. Shenemar, it says, vayefo sabotzek, they baked the dough. Asher etziu mitzrayim, they took out of Egypt. Ki garshu mitzrayim, because they were kicked out of Egypt. V'lo yochlu lisma'ameya v'gam tzeidah lo yoseh lahem. They were not able to tarry. They had to run in a haste. And so the dough was unable to rise. In Egypt, the Jews were commanded to self-quarantine in their homes and make the original Seder of history. They were to finish the Seder by midnight. Then at the strike of midnight, there was a revelation of God. And that was to end the slavery of Egypt, the bondage, once and for all. The Seder they held, the Korban Pesach that they ate that night, was the power, the catalyst to bring about the redemption and the revelation of God that was to take place later. That revelation expresses itself in the smiting of the firstborns at midnight. It's the ultimate of the 10 plagues. At that moment, God's hand became so self-evident and clear to the extent that Pharaoh and the Egyptians dropped their resistance. The entire world, everything they believed in was shattered. And the result was Pharaoh runs out in the middle of the night, chasing after Moshe and Aaron and begging them to leave. And Bnei Israel were pushed to get out. So as they prepared the provisions to leave in haste, they ate matzah before. Now there's this revelation, and now they're coming to eat matzah again, because evidently the dough wasn't able to rise as they were leaving. So the bread remained matzah, dough that didn't rise. And when we eat the matzah today, we proclaim matzah zu, this matzah shanu oichlin al shumma, for what? For the revelation that God appeared to them, and the dough was unable to rise. So why was the dough unable to rise? Apparently because there was no time for the dough to rise, which begs explanation. So the redemption, the actual redemption, when did the Jews actually leave Egypt? They left Egypt in the middle of the day. The moment of the Exodus, the Pasuk says, was be'etzem hayoim hazeh, in the middle of the day, at midday precisely, so that the Egyptians should be able to see. And if anyone is able to stop the Jews from leaving, they should try prevent them. So here we have a 12-hour break from when the revelation of God takes place in the middle of the night. 12-hour break up until the moment that they actually leave. That's plenty of time for the dough to rise. So what does it mean when we pick up the matzah and we say the dough didn't rise because Hashem revealed himself and they didn't have time to leave Egypt, and therefore we eat the matzah? There's a subtle nuance in this piece in the Haggadah. It doesn't say that the dough was unable to rise because of a time issue. Indeed, there was enough time for the dough to rise. The reason the dough didn't rise is because the revelation prevented the dough from rising. The dough can't rise because God appears. You see, the Pasuk says, Matzah zu shanu oichlim al shumma. Why do we eat the matzah? Al shum shelo hispik b'tzekes shel aviseinu lehachmitz, because the dough wasn't able to rise. Not a time issue, but rather ad sheniglo aleim melech malchei amlochim, because God appeared. What does it take for dough to rise? It takes a huffing and puffing of hot air, the ego of the dough. And the dough is unable to rise. When God is revealed, the dough is not able to feel its own self. But first, let's understand, what is the meaning of revelation? What does revelation in the first place imply? A real revelation is a eureka moment, when something brand new pops into your mind. You grapple with trying to understand a concept, and suddenly, eureka, the idea pops into your mind, the penny drops, and you get it. In Kabbalistic terms, we call this chokhmah. What's chokhmah? Chokhmah is often translated as wisdom. But chokhmah really, the etymology of the word chokhmah is koyach ma, the power of what? It's like something from another world just pops into your mind. You didn't get it, and suddenly the penny drops, and suddenly you got it. When children are young and learning to talk and communicate and use language, that's a vivid example of chokhmah that takes place. I recall back in the day, my daughter was 5 years old and just learning how to read. She knew letters and she knew how to speak, but she never connected that letters make up words and words are how to speak. The connection eluded her, and there was no way I could teach it to her. It's a discovery that she, like every child, needed to come up with on her own. So anyway, I was standing in the bank with her, waiting in line, and there was a long, long line. And I'm holding her hand, she's a little kid, and there was a sign in the front that said, "Please wait here in line." There was nothing else to read, and she was just beginning to learn letters. So she looks at the letter and she sees she's reading it slowly and meticulously. And she's reading it again. Every time, slowly. Please wait. And she's not realizing that it's actually words. And she's reading it again and again and again. And I'm watching her because the line was long. And suddenly she jumps up. Her face lights up. She looks, she says, "Please wait here in line." She reads it fast enough. And she suddenly discovers that it says, "Please wait here in line." And she looks at me and she says, "Tati, it says to please wait here in line." I looked at her at the beginning. I couldn't understand. Like, didn't you realize that in the first place? A new world had opened up for her. The next moment, she was walking outside and she was reading every sign and she was grasping what every sign had said. Suddenly, all those shapes, those meaningless shapes that she was looking at all the time, suddenly took on a new meaning. There was a chokhmah, there was a eureka, there was a revelation. As soon as the revelation occurred, she was out of her limited state and her face shone with the glow of revelation. In Talmudic teachings, Rabbi Vohu, it says, Rabbi Vohu's face lit up when he discovered a brand new Tosefta. It's the glow of revelation, of discovery, because you're no longer limited to your previous constraints. We're often stuck in our perceptions of life and viewpoints that limit us. Those things that shackle, bind us and enslave us in our normal patterns and prevent us from seeing things greater and larger than ourselves. Ever seen two people argue with each other? And you look at them and you're noticing how each one is coming from a place of ego. It's like if you watch an argument between two 3-year-olds and you're watching the discussion and the debate, and you'll see that it's all about some ego and some misperception. And the same applies to every single adult as we argue. We're locked into a perspective. Revelation is when finally, all at once, you see things in a brand new light. It's like a chokhmah, an unknown force enters and you suddenly get it. Eureka. Chokhmah, this revelation is like bright lightning. Your face shines, you feel clarity. It's an awesome pleasure that permeates the entire being. The joy of having figured out a solution to the problem you were grappling with. Suddenly the things around make sense and the world falls into perspective. So revelation means experiencing something higher that shatters our barriers and leads us to a higher revelation. So what is a revelation of God? What does it mean? Niglo aleim melech malchei amlochim. What is the before and the after? There is a lock on the world that prevents us from seeing clarity. The lock is our inability to see and to put things into perspective. Like that child who sees the shapes and doesn't understand and can't decipher. And so we suffer and we struggle. We know there's a God. We know He created the world. We even learn that God creates the world every single moment anew. And we know that God is good, and we sense that Ein Ra Yered Milamayla, that no bad ever falls from above. But we have no grasp of what that means. And it remains a hypothetical idea. It doesn't affect our lives in a real way. You can be suffering and struggling, and you don't sense any goodness in the life around you. And you can find yourself bickering and fighting like a 2-year-old child, and you don't sense how ridiculous you're being. Revelation is something higher that we suddenly sense. The source behind it all. In Hasidic teachings, it is explained that the greatest moment of a child's learning is when he gets to say, Abba. A little child, a little baby, knows his father intuitively. And he knows how to say A and Ba. What he doesn't get is that A and Ba are there's this magical word that's going to call out that man in front of you and get him so excited that he's going to be willing to do anything for you. That this man is going to be willing to work and toil and to suffer and struggle all for you, because you, little baby, you said Abba. Chazal say, Ein hatinoik yodea likres Abba, ad sheyitzem tam dogon. A little child cannot say Abba if he's nursing from his mother. He only begins to say Abba the moment he weans himself off nursing and is able to eat grain. Grain has that power. And this is a natural phenomenon that when children start eating grain, they have the power. Matzah is the ability to say Abba, to call out Abba to our Father in heaven. You could learn about Him, you know Him, you could be aware of Him, but we don't truly get that is my Abba. And when we eat the matzah, the penny drops. This is the spiritual power and the force which the Hasidic masters explain is the power of physical matzah. In Egypt, in Mitzrayim, the moment of the Exodus, God was revealed. Everything became crystal clear. You could tell with clarity from that point on that God was creating the world every moment, and no one could deny it. And so the dough simply didn't rise. Because even the simple physical dough felt the revelation of God. That revelation in Mitzrayim was a real divine experience because they had Moshe and Aaron at their side. Moshe and Aaron embody bitul, emunah, a nullification, a sense of God. Moshe and Aaron say, V'nachnu ma. We experience that revelation, that force from above. We are ma. We feel God naturally. We are what? And they pass that experience on to their people. So we lift up the matzah and we say, Matzah zushon oichlim al shumma. That is not yeshiva language, which is this matzah that we eat for what? It's not a question, it's an explanation. This matzah that we eat for the experience of ma, for the experience of nullification to God. Matzah, the Zohar says, is meichla dimhei menusa. It's the food of emunah. And when we sit at the Seder table, we read the Haggadah and we discuss and reflect that emunah. But ever since that first initial moment in Mitzrayim, we don't have natural access to the Emunah of Matzah. To find God is not easy. And in the Haggadah, we recognize the challenge. We recognize that today the matzah is accompanied by maror, by bitterness in our lives. It's not easy to find God when all around you there's bitterness. In the Haggadah we say that the mitzvah of matzah is only fulfilled when you have matzah and maror together in front of you. The word maror, bitter, is the gematria, the numerical value of maves, of death. Because the revelation today is one that we must work hard to achieve. Even as we sift through the dead matter around us, even as we live physical lives, God says, I specifically want the revelation when there's matzah and death and free choice. When the ego is manifesting, you need to have choice and guard the matzah to be able to have it. Having matzah, having emunah is special when you have emunah and maror and bitterness to work through. This is actually the interpretation of a beautiful Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. The Mishnah says as follows: Yafa sho'o achas b'tshuva u'maisim toivim bo'olam hazeh mikol chayei ha'olam haba. Hasidic teachings interpret this literally. One moment in this world is superior to the entire world to come. This physical world is a superior, better place to be in than Olam Haba. Even though Olam Haba, the next world, is this divine revelation. The next world is an experience of connection and attachment to God. No pleasure in this world can ever measure to the pleasure of what it means to be attached to the divine. And still, nothing compares in this world to the revelation of the next world, because in this world you have free choice. The beauty in this world is you have the option of disobeying, the option of maror, of bitterness. In Mitzrayim, God revealed himself. But today, our reflection and inner transformation, that we work on ourselves, that is the revelation of God. When we get it, God becomes revealed. In Mitzrayim, there was a revelation from above. There was Moshe and Aaron leading the people. Today, the revelation needs to come from us, from within. We create the revelation. And as we reflect in the Haggadah, that reflection is the Niglo Aleim, is God revealing himself to us. It's called Teshuvah, a return to God. Thinking about your relationship with God in a new light, in a personal way. The Mishnah says, Yafa sho'o achas b'tshuva u'maisim toivim bo'olam hazeh mikol chayei ha'olam haba. There's no better place to be in than in the state of Teshuvah in this world, and ensuring that our good deeds stem from our inner emunah. Note how the Mishnah says that the best place to be in is a state in this world of tshuva and maisim toivim. Maisim toivim, good deeds, must be prefaced by teshuvah, because you can do good deeds, you can do mitzvahs, you can keep Pesach, and you can eat matzah, but there's no God involved. You find yourself in a hotel with a family, and it is beautiful, but really, it's all about the food and the prestige and the great, wonderful vacation in an exotic place. It looks like Pesach. And then the waiter comes in and you get angry and screaming at him. Why is the food not hot enough? The same person who's experiencing the redemption of Pesach suddenly gets upset at the waiter. And you realize, are we celebrating Pesach? You find yourself davening in shul. You always go to minyan. But when a religious person says, I'm going to chap a mincha, I'm going to grab a mincha, is there really any God involved in chapping a mincha? It looks good, it appears beautiful and holy. But Judaism must stem from the richness of being a Jew. It's about a relationship with God and not about a material experience. And that is why we say teshuvah u'maisim tovim. Why teshuvah? Because if you sit and all you care about is the physical, then there's no sense of tshuva. There's no turn to God. You know, when Paroi had a dream, which Yosef interprets the dream was he saw 7 fat cows, and then there were 7 thin cows. The 7 thin cows swallowed up the 7 fat cows. They swallowed them, and it wasn't even noticeable that they ate them. The fat cows represent the goodness, and it can be swallowed up by the bad to such an extent that it wasn't even discernible. The thin cows ate the fat cows. We can do good, wonderful, fat, beautiful deeds. But our ego and our sense of materialism, our need for materialism, our attachment to the physical world swallows up any sense of goodness in our beautiful, wonderful deeds. I know what my Judaism before Corona looked like. It was more about the show than anything else. The Maisim Tovim not necessarily flowed from an inner truth. When you fress at a wedding, you're eating glut kosher food, and you don't even know who's getting married. And the wealthier the couple, the more people want to be a part of the wedding. When you choose a shul to daven in, based on the shidduch image you hope to portray, and you go to shul, and we're spending all the time in the Kiddush club, is it a wonder that so many couples get divorced? When a person comes to shul and he's more in the Kiddush club than the actual davening, then the Maisim Tovim that we have, those Maisim Tovim need to be preceded by Teshuvah. The Mishnah says, Yofa sho'o achas b'teshuvah u'maisim Tovim. In good deeds that are preceded by Teshuvah, by a yearning for the divine. When we are busy, we never get to reflect, we never get to know God and to connect. But this Pesach is different from all other Pesachs because we're not so busy. Less shopping, there's no extravagance, no hotels, not so much buying of clothing. It's more about survival and just being alive and healthy. This week I've been davening alone without a minyan. And I find it to be the most incredible experience ever. It is difficult and challenging to daven alone. When you're with a minyan, it carries you, it helps you. And being alone is so tough. And on Shabbos, not having that structure is so challenging. But dare I say, and God helped me that I said it, after a few days of davening alone, I have no choice. I'm just sitting there all by myself and davening, and I have to reflect. And as the world is thrown into turmoil, I find my davening to actually be addressing God for the first time, wanting Him with all my being. And somewhere in the midst of the davening, which, yes, alone is sometimes rushed, a new me is beginning to form. The difficulty of davening alone, as the Megillah of Eicha says, Bodod, well, Eicha Yoshva Vodod. What's it like to sit down alone? But Bodod Yeshev, can be a holy, uplifting experience of being alone with myself. And on Shabbos, with no friends and no Kiddushim, I'm forced into my own corner and into a deep realization of my dependence of God and my connection to Him. If there's less running around before Pesach, then for the first time, I can actually reflect on what is Pesach. And maybe a 3-day Yom Tov in quarantine can be a blessing of inner discovery, because Yofa Sho Achas B'Tshuva Masim Toidim B'Olam Hazeh Mikol Chai Olam Haba. You see, the word Sha'ah has a dual meaning. Sha'ah means an hour, 1 moment, 1 hour in this world. But Sha'ah Sha'ah means to turn to God. As we say in davening, V'lisfilasam she'ei, turn to our tefillah, to our davening. And Yafa Shah Achas, one turn, one transformative experience in this world, an experience of Teshuvah and Maisim Toivim, is more valuable than the entire world to come. Yafa Shah Achas, when a Jew is able to turn one moment to God with Teshuvah and Maisim Toivim, that the deeds that we do, the davening that we have, and the good deeds like celebrating Pesach and eating matzah and all the wonderful things are able to flow from an inner truth. Corona has brought out the best in us. The acts of kindness being done today are truly unparalleled. Hatzalah and the medical professionals are heroes. So are the volunteers who deliver food and run errands for those who are in need. The amount of tzedakah being given today is unreal. Last week, we had a Mois Chitin campaign raising money for our single-parent children. And I was calling up people, and I must tell you, it was a very challenging and difficult experience, because a whole 2 days of calling, and one after another, people are telling me how they've lost their livelihood, they've lost everything they have, and they're not able to give. And I called up one guy. I texted him and I said, listen, every year you give $1,800. I know it's difficult and I understand, but would you like to give? And he says, I got to tell you, my entire industry is finished. I have no job. I was laid off, and I don't know where my food is coming from. And I wrote back to him, I said, I understand you, and I get it. It's fine. A few minutes later, he texts me back, and he says, I'm going to give you the same $1,800 anyway, because there are people who need it. That's tzedakah. That's maisim toivim that flows from an inner teshuvah. And that experience of teshuvah and maisim toivim in this world is superior to the entire world to come. I was blown away. People are asking, I certainly got the question, why Corona? Why are we being punished with Corona? What did we do wrong? I think Corona is the greatest opportunity ever. May God send a speedy recovery to all those who need it, a refuah shlema, and a comfort to all those who have lost and their loved ones being taken away during this horrible plague. And yet, this Pesach, we stand at the threshold of the greatest Pesach ever known to mankind. A Pesach which is all about true emunah. A quarantined Pesach, yes. Perhaps no minyan and no hotels and no frills and no physical. Only a spiritual. As we sit and consider the mortality of human life, as we come to see, we finally are able to break through. And we don't need to wait for that moment. This year is a Pesach where we know clearly the fragility and mortality of man. And we know who runs the world, where the one above has seized the reins of the world and said, watch, I'm in control. My dear brothers and sisters, let's seize this awesome moment before everything goes back to normal, God willing. Because Yofa Shor Achas Bitshuva Masim Toivim Boilam Hazeh Mikol Chayei Oilam Habo. This is the greatest Shoah, the greatest moment, the greatest turn to God ever known to mankind in history. And it was worthwhile being placed into this world for this experience. And that's perhaps why we have Corona. As we eat the matzah, let's bring about the revelation from above by reflecting on the richness of being a Jew, just being Jewish and just being attached to God. To be able to experience the simcha from within. There's no better place to be than being alone, yearning for God, not from a cultural vantage. And that's going to shift all the rest of our lives and all the actions. The teshuvah that it comes with. As we eat the matzah, reflect on what matzah is. God is in control. That's the message of matzah. When we move into a reality of seeing God in our lives. Dear Bobby, as you sit down to your 35-minute Seder, I hope it lasts a little bit longer. I hope you sit down and you contemplate and reflect. Ba'avur zeh lo yamarti ela b'shor sheyesh matzah u'morer munachim lefanecha. Yes, there's a lot of morer, a lot of bitterness and death in front of us. But that is precisely what gives us free choice, what empowers us to turn to the matzah, to turn to God and say, Abba, Abba in heaven, ein atinoik, yodea likreis Abba. A child doesn't know how to call out Abba, ad sheyitim ta'am dagon, until he tastes the taste of grain, of matzah. And as the child tastes that beautiful taste of matzah, he reflects in his mind, and you think to yourself, oh God, I'm going to allow this revelation to seep into me, to realize you're in control, you're running it. No bad comes from above. What appears to be negative is really your beautiful, tender, loving caress. And as I break through the external barrier, and as I'm able to see the depth and profundity of what lies behind through reflecting the whole art of the Seder, the whole beauty of the Seder, the extensive explanations, what's it about? About me being able to participate in the process of the Seder. So that when I get to the matzah, I say, God, I'm going to eat this matzah and experience the revelation. Thank you for being attached to you. Thank you for being my Abba. Thank you for being there always for me. And God, I'm going to experience the love of what the Arizal calls zivug adasiya, the ability to feel the glory of God in my life. The prophet Yeshayahu famously declares, and we say it during the tefillah, during davening on Rosh Hashanah in Musaf. V'haya bayom hahu yitaka b'shofar gadol. It will come to pass on that day. A great shofar will be blown. Uva'u ha'ovdim be'eretz Ashur. Those who are lost in the land of Ashur, v'anidochim be'eretz Mitzrayim. Those who are wayward in the land of Egypt, they will all come too. V'ishtachavu la'Hashem, and they will bow down to God, the Har HaKodesh b'Yerushalayim. My dear friends, the great shofar that Yeshayahu was speaking of is being blown right now. There is a spirit of teshuvah. I was reading a beautiful article about how I think the number is 90% of Americans in general are turning now to prayer. There is a spirit of teshuvah that is penetrating the world. And those who are lost in the land of Ashur. What's Ashur? Hasidic teachings explain. Ashur, like we say, Ashur yeshvei veisecha. Ashur means the pleasures and excitement of this world. And all of us who heretofore up until this point were lost in the pleasures of this world. All of us are suddenly realizing, there's a God. Let's go bow down and discover God. V'yishtachavu la'Hashem b'Har HaKodesh b'Yerushalayim. And the nidochim be'eretz Mitzrayim, the wayward who are lost in the land of Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is those limitations that confine us, addictions that we may have, challenges in life that prevent us from being ourselves. Give it over to God. That's what it's about. When the great shofar is blown, all those only a few weeks ago were worried about what pleasure am I looking for on Pesach? And the other ones were depressed on why am I not experiencing a hotel pleasure on Pesach? And as the great shofar is sounded now, the great shofar of teshuvah. But here's the key. God wants us to participate and to bring down that revelation, to seize the moment, to make this Pesach the most joyous Pesach ever known to the Jewish people in history. That all of us should reach out to one another with love and with care. that we appreciate the mitzvahs that we do and the relationship with God that we have in a way that we never knew, by focusing on what the matzah is, on what davening is, on what Shabbos is, so that we don't simply come out of this. Because soon, God willing, everything will go back to normal. And when it goes back to normal, we'll be looking back and saying, did we seize the moment? Did we use that Pesach correctly? And as we seize the moment and experience and let ourselves go with the spirit of tshuva that's pervading the world now more than ever before, V'haya bayom hahu, on that day of concealment, this day, the day of Corona. Yitokah b'shofar Hagadol, as the great shofar is sounded, and all of us realized what we knew to be true, that Abba Sheba Shamayim, our Father in heaven, is real. And as we internalize that this sha'ah, this transformation, Shas Rachamim Ve'Yisratzim Milfanecha, is the greatest moment ever known to mankind. V'yishtachavu la'Hashem bar HaKodesh b'Yerushalayim. If we focus on matzah, focus on the goal, on the purpose, experience the love and joy of Pesach, despite all odds, and we conquer our challenges from within, and we stand up to the message of Bayemahu Yitokah b'shofar Hagadol, then on that day, on this day, things will go back to, not to normal, to real normal, the way it's supposed to be, the way God ordained the world, a world where V'yishtachavu la'Hashem bar HaKodesh b'Yerushalayim. It's up to us to make this Pesach a Pesach from within and to transform it. It's really a surreal experience as I'm staring into a computer screen. And where's everybody in shul? It's a sad moment. But let's transform that sad moment into the happiest moment ever through reflecting on the beauty of what God has given us, the ability to celebrate Pesach, to eat matzah, to be a Jew. Oh, it's good to be a Jew. May we all experience, along with the dear Bobby in quarantine, along with all of the Jewish people, along with the rest of humanity, a real revelation of God once and for all. I'd like to wish you, wherever you may be, a Chag kosher v'sameach, a Chag cherus, a festival of redemption, of the ultimate redemption experienced with Mashiach. Thank you.